Ooh, wow, wow, wow. I don't know what's going to change by the time the show's over. I just know a lot's going to change by the time the show's over. It's not in our control. The portal is closing. It's like a garage door that's about to slam shut, and here we go. It's like 15 people trying to get out of the boiler room before the Titanic sinks. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, the ship does sink. A bunch of folks hitting the door right at the last minute. Don't you love that as a coach? This is Late Kick Live. We are jam-packed. We are high atop a splendid downtown Nashville, Tennessee on this Sunday night, April 30th, the year of our Lord 2023. Yes, friends, the portal is closing. Now, you don't have to have gone anywhere else by the time the sun goes down, but you better have your name in there by the time the sun goes down, or else you're going to wait a little while. Or you could just quit and not play anymore. There's some other stuff going on, though. Star ranking season. No, it's not star ranking season, is it? No, it's not. But it is for me. See, star ranking season for a lot of folks out there, especially the haters amongst us, is when it's the middle of summer or the middle of fall and a kid commits somewhere and you say, 5-star, probably overrated. I probably just got a bump because of intercompany bias towards certain teams. You know, that old chestnut. Well, here's the thing about that. Ultimately, the NFL draft does roll around. And ultimately, if the fine folks here at 24/7 Sports claim that they're modeling their top 32 players after what they think the NFL draft's going to be, well, it stands to reason we should look at the NFL draft, shouldn't we? We will tonight. How accurate is the recruiting industry? We will talk about that. I have also got some very sneaky things that are being said. I've got some schedules that have come out. So the college football playoff is expanding, much to my chagrin, and that's coming next year. That you know. You may not know that some of the early formatting has come out because it's been buried underneath the NFL draft and some other news going on. But there are also some obscure quotes that I want to bring your way tonight. Just to remind you what we're getting into. Not in terms of expansion, that's already decided, but in terms of format. Not how many get in, but whom star those teams that get in. All that, plus we got the Oregon Mood Tracker. If you're listening on podcast, this is a cowbell. As you can hear, it's got my silhouette on it, and there is a very, very interesting story behind this that I will share later in the show. It's not exactly the sort of thing you lead the show with because it would just confuse most newbies and make them run away. They're watching us in Boynton Beach, Florida, Cannon Air Force Base out in New Mexico. They're tuned in, Modesto, California. And look, Chuck, I rarely give out the shout-outs by names, but Chuck is watching us in Waynesburg, PA. Chuck fell off his roof last week, so that put him on the shelf. Then Chuck got food poisoning later in the week, so Chuck has nothing else to do tonight, quite literally, other than watch us and try to keep solid food down. And that is a joke to keep you from crying, Chuck. We appreciate you being tuned in. I would probably say I know how you feel, but I have no clue how you feel. So I can just I can root for you from a few states away and thank you for being tuned in. I have, this is a record, I think. We have 2 Post-its on this sheet of paper in front of me. So there's a lot to cover. And there's a ton to get to tonight. We're jam-packed, so thank you for being with us. Okay, star rankings don't matter. How many times have you heard that? Recruiting rankings are overrated. How many times have we heard that? Now, sometimes you will get anecdotal evidence or an example of a kid who was rated 5 stars and he goes bust for many different reasons. And then you got someone who waves their flag around and says, told you those recruiting rankings don't matter. Well, what the recruiting rankings are not is an inexact science, but what they are is deadly accurate, more so than they have been in the history of this industry. But you don't have to take my word for it. I wouldn't take my word for it. I would force me to back it up. So here walks someone into the room. I dare you to back that up, Josh. Thank you, someone. We just had the NFL draft. And you know, at 24/7 Sports, there are 32 5-stars in every class, and that is pretty much modeled by predicting 4 years down the road, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, who you think the top 32 in the NFL draft would be. Of course, it's impossible to nail that, but that is the working theory behind who you make a 5-star. You want to know how the industry did this year, kids? Because this is not the time of year where you ever hear people talking about recruiting rankings, is it? No. This is not the time of year where anyone's ever shouting from the mountaintops, oh, stars don't matter. Oh, you can get to the NFL no matter what you're rated. That's technically true, but that's not in a vacuum. What we want to know is how accurate is the recruiting industry? In other words, if they give you 5 stars, how much more likely are you to maybe be a high round draft pick or be drafted, period, than if you're a 4-star or a 3-star or a 2-star or unranked. Well, we have numbers. We don't have to worry about it. We have numbers. So 13 5-stars, 13 former 24/7 Sports 5-stars just win in the first round. I mention that because that is the most ever. 24/7 Sports has never had a better NFL draft as it relates to formerly ranked 5-star players than they just had. Now, I'm not on the recruiting rankings council. I'm not on the committee. I just kind of sit over here and watch. And so golf clap for you guys. Barton Simmons is probably over watching the show in a darkened office at Vanderbilt. He was part of that. Charles Power was a big part of that. He's over at On 3 now. So a lot of folks who are here were a part of it. A lot of folks who aren't here anymore or are not here anymore were a part of that. But I'm not strictly even speaking about 24/7. I want to zoom it out for a second. Just look at the industry. I am very, very partial and very biased towards our guys here because I get to see how the sausage is made, and I know they do a great job. And I also know the actual process, which I won't bore you with tonight, but it is very laborious, and you guys know how rarely I use that term. But here is what I wanted you to focus on. So my contention is the recruiting industry. Star rankings have never been more accurate. So actually, the guys at On 3 put up a stat earlier today, and these are shocking numbers. Let's just look industry-wide. If you were a 5-star player in this last draft, you stood an 81.3% chance of being drafted, as it turns out. If you were a former 4-star player, you stood a 22.6% chance of being drafted. So let's just hit the pause button right there. Oh, 5-star, 4-star, it doesn't matter. Oh, that's all just subjective. They're not really judging it on criteria about critical traits. They're just playing favorites with various programs. No, it turns out they're right. It turns out there is a little more science behind that than a lot of folks will lead you to believe. Again, former 5-star player, 81.3% chance of being drafted. Former 4-star player, 22.6% chance of being drafted. Also, if you're a former 5-star player, as of this last draft, you were 21 times more likely to be drafted than a 2-star or lower. 21 times. I want to read that aloud one more time. Former 5-star rated players, 21 times more likely to be drafted than a former 2-star or an unranked player. So anytime someone walks up to you and says, recruiting rankings don't matter, don't take them seriously as a person, at least as a college football fan. Now, if they tell you they're not the end-all, be-all, if they tell you it's not a death sentence if someone puts 2 stars on you, that's accurate. You ultimately have a lot to say about that. But to think that there's not sort of solid work that's gone into formulating that star ranking. No, the NFL draft just craps on that every single year and continues to do it more and more. There's another thing that I want to talk to you about, and that is something that I just hinted around, and that is inherent bias in the rankings process due to things like which program you commit to. The Bama bump has always been a really, really popular term in the recruiting industry. And again, I bring it up in April because no one else talks about the Bama bump in April. Everyone talks about the Bama bump around signing day. Everyone talks about the Bama bump in December because they get really mad because Nick Saban signs a lot of highly rated players, and there's this allegation that they're highly rated because Nick Saban's signing them, and the recruiting industry always wants to scratch Alabama's back. Will Anderson, class of 2020. I will never forget it because we talked about it on the show as it was happening. He kept vaulting every single rankings update. He kept jumping several dozen spots, and eventually, Will Anderson, Alabama commitment, lands inside the top 10 players in the country. Guess what was said about Will Anderson? Bama bump. Guess what was said about Will Anderson? Well, that's just Bama bias. Yeah, he's a good player, but come on, top 10. You know what I didn't hear the other day? I didn't hear a single person talking about the Will Anderson Bama bump as Will Anderson went off the board at number 3 overall, as Will Anderson became the number 1 defensive player overall taken 3 years later. I didn't hear a word. These people turned into ghosts. I could even zoom it out and look at the entire SEC, because as much as we hear about Bama bias and the Bama bump, I hear it about the SEC all the time. Whenever we talk about the conference on the show, whenever you see them covered nationally, there's always the allegation of SEC bias. And really all that means is the allegation is people are making a bigger deal of the SEC than the SEC naturally deserves to have made about it. And I've always laughed at it because I've always asked people, if you believe that, you believe the NFL's in on it too. And they say, what are you talking about? No, this has nothing to do with the NFL. Oh, it does. It does, because for the 17th year in a row, the SEC just led all of America in terms of overall draft picks by conference. Wasn't too far ahead of the Big Ten this year. I'm going to talk about the Big Ten in a second. So you guys up in Chicago and Indianapolis, hang tight. Hey, it's a really good point you want me to make, and I'm going to make it for you. Hang tight. But the old SEC bias crowd, they're ghosts this time of year too. That's why I choose to do this segment every Sunday after the draft, because I want to remind you, when you think about banging this drum later in the fall, please remember you're going to have to account for those words, at least on this show, come April. 17th straight season now. The SEC just had the most draft picks of any conference. 8 of the top 16, first round, 8 of the top 16 from the SEC. Here's a little paper-popping stat producer Jesse brought my way today. Since 2017, SEC has 79 first-rounders. That's 35 more than any other conference. And I said, Jesse, that's good. Give me something great. And so he went to digging. You know what he found? And this is a Post-it pop, because this wouldn't even fit on the sheet of paper. I don't need the whole SEC. Just give me Georgia, Bama, LSU, and Florida. They had more draft picks than the entire Big 12. They had more draft picks than the entire Pac-12. And Georgia, Bama, LSU, and Florida had as many draft picks as the ACC. I've got a little mini conference, even within that power conference of the SEC, where just 4 of them, just a little small box of the teams in the SEC, they're outdoing several Power 5 conferences. It gets even worse, depending on your perspective. I would call this worse if I were just a non-SEC college football fan. Remove Georgia from the SEC. Take Bama out. Get rid of LSU. Get rid of Florida. Just take what's left. That remainder of the SEC still had more draft picks than the Pac-12 and had as many draft picks as the Big 12, which would make a newcomer to the college football party ask, well, why do you guys call it Power 5? It sounds to me like there's the SEC, and then there's the Big Ten. I'm about to talk about them. And then there's, well, who else? Everyone else, right? Not a bad point, newcomer. Power 5 is something that we've just said for a long time, but more and more and more, as you extrapolate the data, you've got a Power 2 in college football, and the Big Ten had the same number of first-round draft picks this past draft as the SEC did. They had 20 in rounds 1 and 2, and that is a record. That is the most ever first and second round combined draft picks for the Big Ten. SEC, Big Ten, then you got a cliff, and then you got the rest of the country. That does not mean, please don't misunderstand me, that does not mean on any given Saturday you couldn't have Texas go beat Michigan. They'll play next year. That's why I mentioned those 2 teams. That doesn't mean you couldn't have Texas come into Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama this year. Doesn't mean that. What it does mean in totality is something I'm going to talk about a lot later in the show, especially when it comes to how we view this conference-built structure we call college football, and especially when we format a postseason for this sport we call college football. Yeah. Last note I wanted to give you here, just to illustrate the gap between the SEC, Big Ten, and the rest of the country. Total draft picks. Always love looking at this stat after we get through a draft. SEC led the way. They had 62 combined draft picks. The Big Ten was not far behind, 55. So SEC 62, Big Ten 55. How close do you think the next closest conference was? That would be the ACC, and that would be 32. Then the Big 12 at 30. Then the Pac-12 at 27. So if you want to insert, and it's not even close, this right here, this conversation would be where you insert, and it's not even close. But yeah, people who tell you star rankings don't matter, NFL draft disproves you every time. People who tell you there's an inherent bias in the ranking system, the NFL draft always serves to disprove that. Not just anecdotally. I used Will Anderson. I could use 100 other examples. Far more times than not, the NFL draft validates the recruiting industry rather than the other way around. So While everyone else hates on him, I'm going to full-throated clap. Not even a golf clap. Full-throated clap. Way to go, guys. I think I just mixed up my papers. Okay. Allergies are still a big problem for me. So we've got a loaded show. I don't even feel like we've started yet, and we're 15 minutes in. Appreciate you guys being tuned in. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you have, I certainly thank you. I've got so many different directions for the show to go. Transfer portal, the door is closing. You've got a few more hours. If you're going to get in there, you better get in there. Casey Thompson got in there. Casey Thompson, Texas quarterback? No. Nebraska quarterback? Well, not anymore. Casey Thompson, to refreshify everyone's memory, he was battling Jeff Sims in the spring. Sims himself had transferred from Georgia Tech, and if this is making your head spin, I haven't even gotten started yet. So I felt, and many felt, like Jeff Sims was going to win the starting job up there. Matt Rule, new head coach, brings in a quarterback from the portal. He inherited Casey Thompson. He went and got Jeff Sims. And sure enough, it looks like Jeff Sims is going to be the starter up there. At least that's what Casey Thompson thought, because Casey Thompson has hopped into the portal. According to our folks over at auburnundercover.com, as we speak, Casey Thompson is on campus at Auburn, which should come as a surprise to approximately no one, because Hugh Freeze, new head coach at Auburn himself, has been just openly vocal over the past week, speaking publicly about how, yeah, you know, I'm excited to work with the guys we have, but if there was an option out there, I'd take it. Allow me to translate. Help! That's what Hugh Freeze said. He could have just yelled help into a nearest microphone, and that would have done better than wasting all that time talking about how excited you are. Casey Thompson may wind up at Auburn. We'll see. Again, he's visiting there right now, and we are live, as live can be, on Sunday night, so keep an eye on that. Okay, it's been a bad day in East Lansing, Michigan. I have been on the phone with our people up there. Whew, okay, so first I'm going to give you the latest news, and then I'm going to give you the news that broke earlier in the day. So Charles Brantley is a corner there, started 11 games for him last year, 48 tackles, 6 pass breakups. He's in the portal. And we didn't even plan on talking about him. That's the way these things go when the portal is closing on you. I've got Post-its all over the desk right now, and they're all transfer portal related. What a mess. This show has not gone green yet tonight. We've got Post-it and paper everywhere. So Charles Brantley's in the portal, okay? So that just happened, and I don't have a ton of intel as to where he may be headed. Everybody automatically just assumes Colorado. I think he may be from near where Deion's from. Let's just wait and see. Let's wait and see. I don't have guided intel on that. However, I do have guided intel, and our folks over at our Michigan State 24/7 site, they do have guided intel on this whole Payton, Thorne, Keon, Coleman situation. Now, many of you are not Michigan State fans. You may know these names, but what a web. What a web that is in the process of being woven. I could make a mini Netflix series just out of this situation. Let me get you up to speed. This is going to sound kind of like middle school hallway rumors, but that's the transfer portal circa 2023. So Payton Thorne, he started there at quarterback for a couple of years. Nearly 6,500 yards passing, about 49 touchdowns. There's no estimate. It's just 49. He's got 49 passing touchdowns. Had a ton of injuries last year, but played through them. Okay, so not that great. Serviceable, but hasn't been that great. If he was sitting here right now, he'd say, I can be great if I'm not hurt. That's okay. Okay, well, hopefully in the future you'll be able to show me that. And he was the quarterback for them in that magical season a couple of years ago, so credit where it's due. 6'2", 210. So think about this. Jaden Reed was a receiver for Michigan State this past year. Jaden Reed just went in the draft. He went in the second round. Rumor on the street is that a lot of staffs out there had reached out to Keon Coleman, who is a stud wide receiver for Michigan State, who also just hopped in the portal a few hours ago. And a rumor on the street is a lot of those staffs were saying, hey, Jaden Reed, that kid y'all had that just went in the second round, he would have gone a lot higher if he had a better quarterback to throw to him. But he was stuck with Payton Thorne. And Keon Coleman got to thinking, saying, that's going to be me a year from now, unless I do something about it. So Keon Coleman hops in the portal. But see, here's the problem. Payton Thorne caught wind of the fact that Keon Coleman may be headed to the portal, and Payton Thorne starts thinking, wait a second, I already lost one of my top receivers. I'm going to lose another top receiver? Who cares if I'm healthy? I'm not going to have anyone to throw it to. I'm hopping in the portal. And then someone tells Keon Coleman, hey, the quarterback you don't want to be saddled with, he's in the portal. What are you going to do now? And Keon Coleman thinks, well, wait a second. That's the dude I was trying to get myself separated from. But now I already told Mel Tucker, I told the team I'm leaving. I'm going in the portal anyway. And that's where things stand at 7:20 p.m. Central Standard Time on Sunday night as the transfer portal is closing. Now, as you listen to all that, remember this. There's a coaching staff up there that's having to try and work around this. That's where we are in the year of our Lord 2023. Wish I had a better update for you in East Lansing, but I don't. Joshua Simmons, we do have some finality on this one. This is a big move for Ohio State. Four-star offensive tackle. We knew that Ohio State was a very strong team coming out of spring, but they had major needs at offensive tackle. They were going to go get someone. They probably got the best tackle who has been in the portal, 6'6", 305, from San Diego State, headed to Ohio State. He is a guy, I think he has at least 3 years left. There's kind of nebulous. Some people would say 4 because he's got a COVID year. Ohio State folks will tell you, look, if he's as good as we hope he is, we're not going to have to worry about 3 or 4 years anyway. Tywan Malone's also been on campus up there. So Simmons has committed. So that's done. Put a wrap on that. Tywan Malone's a defensive tackle from Ole Miss, and I think he was in town this weekend. I think he's headed back to Oxford as we speak. Let's see what happens there as well. So getting some help on the lines of scrimmage at the very last minute. At least that's what Ryan Day is trying to do. Now, a reminder, you don't have to have your class secured by the end of today, but if you're entering the portal and you want to be eligible this year, you have to have done it by the end of today. That entire segment did not have any Colorado in it. For those of you who are tired of me talking about Colorado, don't rejoice. There was so much Colorado, I just had to create another segment for it later in the show. So stick around. And for the hundreds of thousands of you who do love that, also stick around. But I'm not doing it right next because we have several other things to talk about, including our fine friends at Academy Sports and Outdoors. Did you know that we were at Penn State a couple of weeks ago? Yes, most of you do. We had James Franklin on the show. We did the show live from his patio, and it was 70 degrees and sunny. Jesse got mildly sunburned. It was great. It is going to snow up there this week, about 2.5 inches, and it's going to be May when it happens. It's going to be May, as Justin Timberlake once famously said. My point there is it's a funny thing that happens in spring. My voice sounds weird because I'm clogged up with allergies. You can get sunburnt and then build a snowman 3 weeks later. You need a variety of outdoor gear is my point. And Academy Sports and Outdoors is the place to do it. Now, just southwest of State College, down in Lafayette, Indiana, not only am I talking to you, but you got the added bonus of having a brand new Academy Sports and Outdoors in your backyard. And I was talking to our fine friends at Academy Sports and Outdoors this past week. They got so many new stores opening this year. September alone is going to be wild. So we'll get to that when we get to that. But in the meantime, if you don't have one in your backyard, that's okay because you've got internet. And if you don't have it, don't be like me. Don't be cheap. Buy it. And then as soon as you got that internet hooked up, academy.com, they got your hookup. And they've got us hooked up, and they bring our show to you free of charge, and we eternally appreciate them for that. Okay. Sorry, I thought I saw something in the chat. I see what you said, Eric. Yes, in May, 2.5 inches of snow is a lot. I thought you were going to throw an immunity on the end of it, and you didn't, and I appreciate you for keeping it civil and keeping it PG in the chat. Not all of us are that mature, I can assure you. I've got to be very guarded about this next segment. I got to be very measured in my approach. I'm going to take a sip from the chalice if you don't mind. Thank you. So I see our numbers. A ton of you are new every week. So you come here, you don't know that I was against playoff expansion and I didn't get my way on it. And I've closed the book on it, and I've moved forward, and I have vowed not to continuously relitigate that. And I'm not going to do it tonight either. So this is not a complaint segment. It is just a wag the finger, hey, make sure you're paying attention to this sort of segment, because there has been some news this week, 2 bits of it that I want to point your attention to. And it's kind of been buried by the NFL draft, and there's been a lot of stuff going on. Did you know, for example, that they released the college football playoff scheduling format, the expanded playoff? This right here is the last year that we're having a 14 playoff. I'm just pausing so you can cheer. Oh, who are these sick people? I kid. And so then we're going to the expanded 12-team format. Now, as you look on the screen, or if you're listening on podcasts, let me tell you, here's what came out. The first round games will be played on campus, and it'll be Friday and Saturday, December 20th and 21st, or as I would call it, December 20th and the first day of meteorological winter. Then the second round games, nope, not on campus. They're going to be at bowl sites on New Year's Day. Then the third round, because yes, we're talking third and fourth rounds now in college football playoff lore, or college football conversation. Those will be Thursday or Friday, January 9th or 10th. That's when the title game normally would have been played. And then the championship game will be played Saturday, January 20th. So we started on the 20th and we ended on the 20th. It's a solid month of playoff. Oh, by the way, we're going to mix in Christmas and New Year's and whatnot in there as well. The date of the fourth game is TBD. Anyway, so this obviously fluctuates year to year. This is just the first year, and that's the way it's going to work out. Okay, that's the schedule. That was just news that you may or may not have seen. But also, what I want to do tonight, just for a couple of minutes, is I want to remind you of something. Now, I want to remind you of the process that goes into selecting the teams. And then I want to remind you, for those who remember how adamantly I was against expansion, remember there were two key reasons. One of them was just out of principle, and that was, I don't think we need it. I would love to crystallize the regular season, and I would love to maximize the importance of every game. And I know the counter arguments to that. We're not getting into that. So that was one reason. The other reason was I didn't like the devil in the details when it came to what the selection process was going to be. And for those of you who have forgotten, the selection process is they're taking 6 at-large teams, but they're also taking the 6 highest-ranked conference champions. 6. They're taking half a dozen of the highest-ranked conference champions. That virtually assures that every Power 5 conference champ is going to the playoff every year. Now, there are some folks out there who think that's a good thing. I think auto bids are a joke in any format in college football. Now, college basketball, I'm for it all day. Totally different sport, apples to bowling balls. But I've been against this. You guys know, I've talked about this for a long time. Well, I want to ask you, do you see where this is headed? And I want to remind you of something. Earlier in the show, we talked about the gulf when it comes to NFL draft numbers between the SEC and the Big Ten and everyone else. We have seen in media rights deals the gulf that will continue to exist and expand between the SEC, the Big Ten, and everyone else. Realignment matters a lot too, guys. You can't just think about how you define the future of college football by what it's been, because the future of college football is going to look a whole lot different. And that's why I really question whether we should continue to even use the moniker Power 5. Some folks have already stopped using it. Power 5 indicates that there are 5 conferences out there that are at least roughly similar. Certainly there's a hierarchy, but they're roughly similar. I don't think we're really headed towards a world where that exists anymore. And I want to pay close attention to the Pac-12 for a second. USC's out there right now. UCLA's out there right now. They will not be out there. They are about to go to the Big Ten. And that brings me to an article by, I think it was Seth Davis, who writes for The Athletic. And he was interviewing the San Diego State athletic director earlier this week. And there was a quote from the San Diego State athletic director, John David Wicker, and it's on your screen now if you're watching on YouTube. Quote, "One or the other is going to happen. We're excited for the opportunity, and we've done a lot of work to prepare for that." Now, that's an out-of-context quote. You want me to tell you what he's talking about? He's talking about San Diego State either going to the Pac-12 or the Big 12, and it's most likely going to be the Pac-12. Do you see where I'm going with this? Do you see where the Pac-12 is going with this? And do you see where the College Football Playoff Committee, and when I say committee, I mean powers that be, have been going with this for a long time? The Pac-12 is losing major players like USC. They are backfilling those spots. An already weak conference is backfilling the departure of some of the very few power players that were out there with G5 also ran programs and still expecting to be taken seriously on the national stage. This is where the concept of the 6 conference champ auto bid process becomes a joke to me. Always has been a joke, but it's really a joke now. The entire concept of auto bids for conference champs only makes sense in a sport where they're at least somewhat within the same competitive realm. The Pac-12 is losing teams like USC, and they're going to backfill it with teams like San Diego State, and it's already a weakened conference. NFL draft numbers bear that out. College football playoff numbers bear that out. Media rights deal numbers bear that out. A weakened conference is only going to get weaker in the coming years, and that's without even knowing what Washington or Oregon are going to do. That's without even knowing what those 4 corner schools are going to do. That's without even knowing what the media rights deal is going to be. And you're going to tell me, well, yeah, but they should still get a guaranteed spot in the playoff. Anyone of sound mind knows how misdirected this is, because anyone of sound mind who watches this sport knows any conference champ worth their salt is already ranked in the top 12. So anybody who's actually worth being in the playoff is already going to be ranked high enough to be in the playoff. They didn't go for that. They wouldn't sign off on that. They would only sign off on the deal if there was a carve-out. Sounds a lot like Washington, doesn't it? Not the Huskies, the one on the other coast. Sounds a lot like politics in the sense that they had to get a special carve-out for something that they otherwise were not going to earn in merit. That's where the college football playoff's headed. It's going to be a tournament of inclusion for the sake of inclusion. This is always the direction it was going. It's not a tournament for excellence. It's not a tournament based solely on merit. And there are still going to be some who yell at me, well, yeah, but what better way to decide who should be in than taking teams that win their conference? How can you have a legitimate playoff if you don't include conference champs? My counter to that is, how can you look at all conference champs as being legitimately equal or close to equal? How can you look at a conference like the SEC or the Big Ten, and in the future, look at a conference that's losing USCs and replacing them with San Diego States and say, the team that comes from over there and the team that comes from down here or up here, yeah, they're roughly similar to me. No, they're not. No, they're not. But this is the format that they snuck in on you, or maybe they didn't sneak it in on you. Maybe some of you support this. I think it's trash. I've always thought it was trash. You always would have gotten pushback from me on expanding the playoff because of principle, but if you would have given me an expanded playoff with just the top 12 regardless, at least I would have said, well, that's a fair way to format it, because conference champions, if they're worth anything, they're going to be ranked in the top 12 because the rankings process itself would still have valued conference champions. I want you to remember this now. When they come out with that final ranking, right before they do the selection process, the one that comes out after the conference championship games have been played, their own criteria, the committee's own criteria stipulates that they give preference to conference champs. So you would have not only had your regular season records merit to go on, but if you won that conference title game, you would have been vaulted even higher than that additional win otherwise normally would have vaulted you. And we're going to live in a world where even if that didn't get you high enough, you're still going to get in anyway. Why? Because you're a conference champ, one of 6 highest ranked conference champs. Pathetic, predictably pathetic, but that's where we're headed. And that's what's best for the sport, I'm told. They're watching us in Boonville, Mississippi, Denver, Colorado, Macclesfield, North Carolina. They're all tuned in. I have a story for you right quick. I have a cough and a story for you right quick. This is a cowbell with my silhouette on it. I did not have this when I woke up yesterday, but I've got it now. Let me tell you how I acquired this cowbell with my silhouette on it. This is going to sound made up. None of this is made up. There I stand on the street last night around 7:15 p.m. No one knows where I am. I have not publicized my whereabouts at any point during the day. I'm going to meet my Uber driver. They and they alone know where I am at that point in time. A dude pulls up in a Jeep. I'm not looking for a dude in a Jeep. That's not my Uber driver. Here you go, Colin. Oh, there we go. My Uber driver's not in a Jeep. Jeep parks. Jeep puts on his flashers. A guy gets out of the Jeep, starts walking towards me with this cowbell in his hand. I say, hey. He says, Josh Pate? I say, yeah, that's me. You don't have my food? It doesn't look like, no, I don't have your food. I've got this. I've been dying to give it to you. I've just been driving around with it in my Jeep. Now, I want you to think about the situation. Again, this is not the Uber driver. This is not anyone I know. Friend of the program, as it turns out, but it's not anyone I know. It's not anyone I've ever spoken to. It would be one thing if he handed me a blank cowbell. Okay, because he could have had 1 million of these in his car, and he just hands them out to anyone, and, oh, there's that guy whose show I watch. Let me give him a blank cowbell. No, friends. The cowbell has my face on it. And I know good and well he did not have the technology in that Jeep to create this on the fly. So, abduction is where my mind immediately goes. But thankfully, I survived the encounter. And not only did I survive the encounter, it turned out very friendly. And now, via direct message, I have exchanged contact information. We took a picture right there on the street corner. And all's well that ends well. But I just want you to explain a few things to me. Number one, what are the odds? I looked up the population of Nashville today. It's a little over 1.3 million people. And I'm the one who just happened to be right place, right time. I have suspicions. Number two, could the government be involved? And before you say no, think about all the ways you could say yes. And number three, this had to have been made a little while ago because as you see, the microphone in the picture has the windscreen. And Colin, we've had this microphone for a while because we took our winnings from the NFL playoffs, which I won a healthy amount of money from, and we invested it back into the show. Why? Management sure wasn't going to do it. And so we bought a microphone. And we hadn't had the windscreen on the microphone in a while. So his story checks out. His story fully checks out. I guess what I have to say is I appreciate it. And the other thing that I want to tell you is you hear how loud that is? This is one cowbell. I have been to Starkville, Mississippi. I've seen 2 games actually in person at Mississippi State. Imagine like 65,000 of those things. It's so loud. It's the loudest stadium I've been to, but no one ever believes me because all they think about is the capacity. What they don't think about is the capacity plus pretty much everyone waving one of those things violently in the air. But I got my own personalized cowbell now. Does Brandon Walker have one of those? I don't think so. I've been in Mississippi more this year than Brandon Walker has to begin with, though. So like I said earlier today when he came at me, some people are questioning his roots, but you can't question mine. So I appreciate the cowbell, appreciate it, and had a little fun with the story. But yeah, just unbeknownst to me, someone was riding around with a cowbell with my face on it looking for me this whole time. And that's about all I want to know about it. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That's not the end of the show. I wanted to weave that story into the show. And we got a nice, healthy live audience watching. I appreciate it. It's interesting times in college football. Let's just say you had your own college football show. Not a local one. Let's say it's a national show and you claim to follow what the audience wants. So you talk about Deion Sanders one day. Video blows up. You think, it's Deion. Then you talk about Colorado and Deion again. Video blows up again. And you look at the inner workings. We can see pretty much everyone who watches our videos. It's people from all over the country. So people in the Pacific Northwest, every region of the country geographically, they are watching those Colorado and Deion videos. But then you know that there's this other sizable portion, because they are very vocal, of your audience who says, I don't care about Deion in Colorado. Talk about teams that are relevant. How would you format your show? How would you stack your show? It's a struggle. It's really a struggle. So here's what I'm going to tell you. I've got a few things to say right quick about what's happening at Colorado because the numbers that were already unprecedented have become even more unprecedented. And if you don't like it, just wait like 3 minutes and we'll be done. Okay, Colin, here's your end point for YouTube. The numbers at Colorado are incredible. And I know they were crazy last week, but they're even more crazy now. So here are the updated, as of Sunday night, portal numbers. As of now, it is like 7:40 p.m. as I'm talking to you. Colorado has lost 57 guys to the portal. They have added or they have lost 30 since the spring game. I hesitate to even say this definitively because the numbers keep changing. So Colorado's lost 57 to the portal. They've lost 30 since the spring game. They have 13 scholarship players left from their entire 22 roster. I've got to say that again because I don't think you understand how wild that is. They had 83 guys on scholarship on last year's team. 13 of them are left. That's insane. That's just wild. Half of that would be wild. They've got 13 guys left. Sometimes you turn on the spring game and you've had an abnormal amount of departures to the draft or graduation, and you say, boy, I don't recognize any of these guys. No. There are Colorado season ticket holders who intimately follow their team, who will be able to say, I really don't recognize any of these guys. You don't. None of them were there last year. 13 of them remain. So, Seydou Traore, just these are names popping left and right. He's a tight end, number 31 overall player in the portal. Okay, you may recognize that name because I talked about him like a month ago because he was at Arkansas State, big-time tight end prospect. He was one of 6 tight ends to catch 50 or more balls last year. And he goes in the portal from Arkansas State, and we say, watch out for Colorado. He goes to Colorado. It didn't last because he's back in the portal now, and we don't know where he's going to land because this is all happening in real time. So that's not great news. I would assume that wasn't forced by Deion and company. I can never know for sure. We got 2 wide receivers to talk about. There you see Traore's numbers there. First team All-Sun Belt, by the way, when he was at Arkansas State. So he's a good player, 6'4", 210. So let's keep an eye on him, okay? I know it feels like it's moving fast, because it is. We got 2 wide receivers to talk about right quick. Jordan Tyson, he led that team last year in receiving yards and touchdowns. Montana Lamonius Craig, he's also 4-star wide receiver in the portal now. 3 catches, 154 yards, 2 touchdowns in the spring game. So if you watched their spring game, you noticed him. Looks like he's got a ton of offers already. We have heard Penn State, we've heard Auburn, we've heard Purdue. So another 2 pretty high-profile receivers there. Those are 3 pass catchers just in the last 2 minutes I've told you about. But it's not all bad news now. Obviously, when it comes to churn, when you have guys going out, you got more guys coming in. By our count, we think they're going to add like 15 or 20 more players, or they've got room to do that. But a couple that they've added recently, Demoy Kennedy, linebacker from Alabama, really good player. Just a victim of depth there, but really good player. Has played for Charles Kelly, and that's notable because Kelly is the defensive coordinator now for Deion. Also, Jaquez Robinson was a Bama corner, and he also familiar with Charles Kelly. He was a 4-star guy from that 2019 class, 6'2", about 190. Both of those guys have transferred now to Colorado. So that's official, that's done, and they're not going to be able to transfer out of there because the window's about to close. Derek McClendon, edge guy from Florida State. He is also headed to Colorado. That is official. 6'4", 255 pounds. So a bunch of names coming off the board. A bunch of names on the board. And like I said, the door closes after today being Sunday, but you could still hear news Monday or Tuesday, and certainly they could still add guys indefinitely. Because there's really, there's not an immediate deadline for when you have to be on a roster. You just have to be in the portal by a certain amount of time. So names are still going to pop. Names are still going to pop, and I don't know how radical you thought this was going to be. And I don't really remember how radical I thought it was going to be. I didn't think it was going to be this radical. Even I would have looked at you like you were crazy if you said, out of the 83 scholarship players from last year's team, 13 of them are going to still be there after spring. I didn't think that was possible in college football. But apparently it's possible when Deion Sanders is your head coach at Colorado. Wild, wild stuff. Okay, now we move on. Very, very healthy balance there of getting our Deion Colorado fix while not chasing off people who don't want to listen to it. I think a responsible approach from us. But there are some out there who think I acted irresponsibly today. Not when it comes to Colorado. Colin, we have the tweet. Let's just tee that up. I'll let one of you lead it off. Yes, why not? Okay, so Colin had 1,000 of these that he could have chosen from, but he chose the right one. Braden hit us up, And he said, do you ever stop hating on Florida, bro? Yes, I do, Braden. I do, because I've never started hating on Florida. There are some things that people believe about me, and one of them is that pretty much half of the audience tends to think that they know who I like or don't like. And then there's a large chunk of any team who's been bad for a few years who thinks I hate their team because I've spoken truth about their team. Those same fans, in this case Florida fans, use as evidence I'm also a homer for their biggest rival, Georgia, because I have done crazy things like speak glowingly of Kirby Smart's team because they've won back-to-back national titles. So there's the hatred. I am in a business where I openly root for Florida to win. I am in a business where it is good for me when Florida wins. I hate they've been bad, just to make sure it's official, and I'm on the record with how I feel about Florida. Love going down there. Love 98% of the fan base. I know that this is not the majority, etc., etc. Okay, so now that we've got the pleasantries out of the way, what did this stem from? Braden's not just talking because it's Sunday. Braden saw something, didn't he? What did he see? Colin, could you show me what I responded to earlier today? So, there was an account on Twitter that chose to showcase the disparity between where Anthony Richardson got drafted and where Stetson Bennett got drafted. Richardson goes round 1, pick 4. Stetson Bennett goes round 4, pick 128. And they put it out there like it was supposed to reflect positively on Florida. And I said, as you can see, this isn't the flex you think it is. And a bunch of folks came at me. Now, in fairness, most people got where I was coming from, and they just said, hey, nice job. But a lot of Florida folks didn't. They came at me and said, oh, what, now you're going to dunk on us again? What, because we can't love our player? Love your player all you want to. Oh, we can't celebrate him just because we had a bad year? We can't celebrate Anthony Richardson going first round? I didn't say that. I'd celebrate him all day, twice, since it's Sunday. You didn't single out Anthony Richardson. You compared him to Stetson Bennett. That's not celebrating your guy. It's trying to create some warped comparative analysis that it executes the hardest thing that there has been to do lately, and that is show Florida as a greater than, in any comparison, to Georgia. So I looked at it and I said, what is this? Celebrate Anthony Richardson. Who's trash-talking Stetson Bennett? The dude just won back-to-back national titles. So then it got worse. In the replies, some guy comes in. So I say some guy because I don't know him. And these are always my favorite. He comes in and he says, hey, how much you want to wager on who plays more meaningful snaps in the NFL? Open that wallet since you like to flap them gums. And I said, sir, this also isn't the flex you think it is. He said, that's because you know who's going to play more meaningful snaps, writing checks the pitiful Freights can't catch. The Freights are the mascot of our hypothetical Pate State University, for those unfamiliar, or theoretical Pate State University. And I said, no, I think it's funny to brag about how faster you are than the guy who just lapped you in a marathon. It goes back to my premise. You want to celebrate Anthony Richardson, go for it. But if you want to compare Anthony Richardson to Stetson Bennett and do it from the perspective of a Florida Gators fan, this is not golf. It's not tennis. It's not an individual sport, and it boggles my mind how anyone could even find the gumption to open their mouth from the Florida side of the fence and speak ill of Stetson Bennett. This is a two-star dude who's a former walk-on that they got 2 national championships out of. It's not the flex you think it is to compare your first-round dude to their should-have-been undrafted dude. Stetson Bennett on most any other roster is selling insurance right now. And instead, he plays at Georgia, and Kirby Smart does exactly what he's supposed to do. He surrounds him with a lot of talent, and he's a 2-time national champion. I don't care what you think about his attitude. I don't care if you think he's going to play more downs in the NFL. That wasn't what the conversation was about. Now, I will give it to that guy. He did what I've always advised you guys to do. Anytime you're in a debate, the quickest way to find out if someone means what they are saying is to make them put money on it. Money is the great truth detector. It will shut people up quicker than you can imagine. He didn't do that with me, though, like he thought he did. So credit for trying. But who's going to have the more successful NFL career? I couldn't care less about. Who's going to have the more successful NFL career? I wasn't talking about. I do, however, remember that Brock Purdy had a pretty good year last year as Mr. Irrelevant. But be that as it may, like, I'm sitting there talking about how the two compared in college in a team game, and it's like, here's what that would be like. It's like I walk into the room, I see you and your girlfriend, and I say, I think my girlfriend's prettier than yours. No offense. I just think she looks better than yours. And then you come back at me and say, I guarantee you mine's got higher SAT scores than yours. And I say, that's not what this is about. That's not what any of this is about. I'm talking HOT. I'm not talking SAT. Where did this even come from? And I'm looking at people talking about how they're going to fare in the NFL. And I'm asking, where does that even come from? So that was my back and forth today that I guess voluntarily entered into. And I made sure underneath that tweet to shout out my folks over at Swamp 24/7, although I knew it would fall on deaf ears. And I said, guys, don't take this personally. Don't take this as me being a Gator hater, because we've come so far. But then they called me all sorts of derogatory names on Swamp 24/7, which is fair. I've come to expect it from that board. I still love you guys. I will say there are a couple of posters over there who suffer from chronic selective hearing, because it goes back to this notion that I hate Florida, which is just stupid. But it exists. It goes back to that notion. And I go over there, and people are talking about how, oh, you never give Billy Napier a break. Let me tell you something. 2 months ago, you guys had coaches hit the exit door, one after another after another. And the rest of the known universe was hating on Billy Napier and hating on Florida, saying, uh-oh, mass exodus, rats jumping off a sinking ship. And I came on this show, and I said, where did they go? The NFL? You're telling me the guy lost coaches to the NFL? You're telling me the guy hired coaches that were good enough to warrant consideration from the NFL? Yeah, that's what happened, Josh. Isn't that a testament to Billy Napier instead of a criticism? Stroke of the chin. I guess you have a point. Well, the Swamp 24/7 board didn't remember that. My Florida folks who were dunking on me today, they didn't remember that. And conversely, they said, all you do is praise Mario Cristobal because he came on your show a few times. Did anyone listen to me last fall when Miami was sucking water through a garden hose? Did anyone listen? No, that's what selective hearing is all about. You hear what you want to hear. You forget what you want to forget. Hey, credit to them for getting Armstrong as well, defensive coordinator. Think it's a good hire. There's a reason Nick Saban wanted him, and Napier went and got him. Shined in the spring game. Offense didn't. Defense did. So anyway, I say all that to say I don't hate Florida. I just hate when people say I hate Florida, and that's the end. Not of the show. That's just the end of me talking about that. As much pent-up hostility as there was there, I've got nothing but good things to say about the next team we're going to talk about. I do want to sip from the chalice, though. Man, 3 coughs in the show. Allergies should be going away. Shouldn't be getting worse. Oh, I just want people to feel sorry for me. That's all I want. What a weekend at Oregon. There's some things happening up there. Honestly, I don't think most of the country knows. So I noticed, Pac-12 Payton noticed, I turn on the Oregon spring game, and it's like a big recruiting poster. They had 45,000+ people in that place. You know, that's the coast. They don't care about football, allegedly. Well, they do in Eugene, Oregon. And they got 45,000 up there. Picture perfect day. Dan Lanning, if I gave him cheat codes to control weather, could not have dialed it up any better. They had 45,000 and an army of highly rated recruits in there from multiple classes. Steve Wiltfong detailed that very extensively over on 247sports.com earlier today. DuckTerritory.com is our Oregon 24/7 site, so they'll have wall-to-wall coverage of that. If you're an Oregon fan and you're not subscribed there, you're really missing out. So I thought to myself, well, with all this positive energy up there and with all these kids on campus, might it be time to just go ahead and do the Oregon Mood Tracker? And yes, it is. By the way, all these 24 and 25 recruits on campus, Jesse comes to me today and he says, hey, Oregon's ranked top 10 in the 2024 team rankings. They're number 9 right now. That's going to fluctuate wildly. Some teams, just take it for what it's worth right now is what I'm saying. Oregon number 9. He said the next closest Pac-12 team is Arizona, and they're 37th. Woof. Not for Oregon. It's quack for them. Woof for everyone else. So what is the mood of the Oregon fan base? We do the mood tracker on the show a lot. That's just taking the temperature of the fan base. And I had to think long and hard, immunity, about the mood for the Oregon fan base. Jesse had some good ideas for names, but I settled on surging in silence because I don't think a lot of people are picking up what Oregon's putting down right now. And there's a reason for that. USC has taken a lot of the oxygen out of the room in the Pac-12. And that's not a problem. It wasn't a problem for Utah last year. It's not a problem for Oregon right now, I don't think. So recruiting's just humming. I don't think anything more needs to be spoken about that. Defense has been a primary focus since the day that coaching staff took over. And defense, I think from a personnel standpoint, has been massively upgraded at Oregon, but they also kept Bo Nix at quarterback, which doesn't count in recruiting rankings. But you talk to their people, which I have, and they'll tell you that's as big a recruit as we could have possibly signed. Keeping Bo Nix, convincing him to come back for one more year, huge. As you know, we went up there for the UCLA game last year, and Dan Lanning and his staff are always very accommodating and got a good feel for the vibe around the program. They got it better than about 98% of the other places that I go. And I don't always like doing the comparative thing, but they've got a really, really good vibe up there. And it's not just the people in the building that feel it, because that's not the goal. The goal is to make outsiders feel it, and namely prospective student athletes. Those are the ones who have to feel it. No one ever comes back from Oregon and speaks negatively about the experience. Now, you may think to yourself, yeah, Josh, but I read these articles, and kids always speak glowingly of every program they go to. Not off the record, they don't. You should hear what we hear off the record. We don't hear that stuff about Oregon, or at least I don't. The other guys can talk about whatever they hear. I don't hear anything negative about Oregon. Some of the kids that don't commit there still say, hey, I'm going to Pate State, but man, I love Oregon, though. Man, I really love Oregon. Does America know this, is my point? If the mood up there is surging in silence, does America know this? I kid you not, as I started to hint on Twitter earlier today that I was going to talk about Oregon on the show tonight, I had some of their fans reach out. I had a couple of former players reach out and say, hey, we wouldn't mind if you just didn't talk about us. We enjoy Lincoln Riley, and we enjoy USC getting all the shine. We got plenty of shine in the stadium yesterday in the spring game, but other than that, we would just prefer to sit over here and grind away, continue to load up layer after layer, player after player on this defensive front, while you guys celebrate Bear Alexander down the coast. Look at all these no-name guys we're stacking up here. You'll know their names in the season. You'll know about us in the season. But as for now, just let us surge over here in silence. That is top to bottom the attitude of that fan base right now. They know they've got something good going on up there. They got plus 280 odds to win the Pac-12 this year. That's the second best odds in the conference, right behind you-know-who. And I'm not here to take anything away from USC. You know how high I am on them. But there's a certain thing, or a combination of things, that teams who have won conferences and gone to have success in the playoffs have had. And one of them is depth, quality second-line depth on the defensive front. Oregon's building that rapidly. They are building that and developing that through the portal and traditional recruiting. There was no mystery to me that, Dan Lanning, a defensive guy, he was going to go in there and do that, but he's validating it. So it's going to be an interesting year out in the Pac-12 because you see it's going to be a conference full of really good quarterbacks. Who can get after the quarterbacks? Who can force offenses to be one-dimensional? Utah has been that team at times. I don't know anyone out there who's more equipped to be that this year than Oregon. They open against Portland State. They go to Texas Tech in week 2. The week 2 out-of-conference schedule for teams in Texas is amazing. Bama hosts Texas that week. Like you see there, Oregon goes to Texas Tech. Houston plays Rice. Someone's got to play food. There's another big one. Jesse, who does Baylor play? I cannot remember off the top of my head. But there's another big one. I'm stalling right now so Jesse can look it up. Anyway, here's my go-to phrase. Now, I say all that to say there's a lot of really, really good out-of-conference matchups featuring Power 5 teams from the state of Texas in Week 2. Did Jesse find it? Did Jesse find it? No, Jesse didn't find it. That's fine. Still, Colin says still searching. I don't know. You guys can look it up yourself. Utah. Yes, Utah. Utah plays Florida Week 1. They play Baylor Week 2. Good for Utah. Good for you. You shouldn't be punished if you lose one of those, by the way, or at least punished like some folks won't because they scheduled roast beef tech in Catawba Community College. Oregon is doing some things. Don't be the guy at the water cooler second, third week of October saying, Oregon, man, I knew they were good, but I didn't know they were this good. I'm trying to tell you right now. They're not, though. They keep putting their index finger over my lips and trying to shh me. And I'm not going to talk about them every show, but it is my duty to inform you Oregon could be pretty darn good this year. I think this was a pretty darn good show, considering after the medication I take afterwards, I may not even remember it. Thank you guys for getting me through it. Over 2,000 live. Wow. Thank you. It is what a casual would call the off season. Not for you, though, apparently. Our average viewership set records again last month, so just please keep doing what you're doing. And then tell 5 friends to subscribe to the channel in the process, because that is really all I ask you for at this point. Subscriptions, the podcast, and the YouTube channel. Until next time. And we're back on a normal schedule this week. So Thursday night is our next Late Kick Live. Tuesday, we'll have a Late Kick Extra podcast for you. Until then, for producer Jesse, for director Colin, I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Have a great rest of your night and a start to your week, and God bless.